All right, now that we know how to find missing sides of a right triangle using trigonometry, we're going to go ahead and look at how do we find the missing angles of right triangles. So just a review from yesterday is we need to be able to identify the sides of a right triangle, knowing that the hypotenuse is always the longest side, which is opposite of your 90-degree angles. And then your two legs are either going to be an opposite side or it's going to be an adjacent side, based off of which angle you are working with. So once you have the opposite, adjacent, and hypotenuse sides down, that brings us into our trig ratios that we talked about of sine, cosine, and tangent, knowing that the sine is the opposite side over the hypotenuse, cosine is the adjacent over the hypotenuse, and tangent is the opposite over adjacent. It's these trig ratios that are going to help us find the missing angles. So here I have a right triangle, and with that right triangle, I am able to create 6 different ratios. And of these 6 different ratios, they are based off of angles B and angle C. We know that angle A is the 90-degree angle. We just do not know what angle B and angle C are. So we're going to use our trig ratios now to help us figure out what angle B and angle C are. How we're going to do this is we're going to be using a inverse. And we're going to be using the inverse of our sine and cosine and tangent function on our calculator to help give us our angle. And so what I'm going to do here is I cannot just divide both sides of my equation by the sine. Okay, that doesn't work to come up with what angle B is. You're taking the sine of an angle, which gives you this ratio. So how we reverse this is we do something called the inverse sine, which looks like sine to the power of -1. And we're going to take the inverse sine of the trig ratio that we have of 30 over 34, and what that's going to do is it's going to give us our angle. I can do the same thing with cosine and tangent. We can use the inverse cosine of 16 over 34. And then we could also do the inverse tangent of 30 over 16. Now what this is all going to tell me how to do is it's going to give me the angle that I'm looking for. And in all 3 of these here, it's going to give me angle B. So going to my calculator, I should have the exact same answer for all 3 of these, since angle B is just one angle. Going to my calculator, how I get the inverse sine, I'm going to hit my second button, and then I'm going to hit sine, and there's my inverse. So then I'm going to take 30 divided by 34 and hit enter, and I end up with 61.9 degrees. If I do the same thing with cosine and tangent, inverse cosine of 16 divided by 34 gives me the exact same angle. If I do the inverse tangent of 30 divided by 16, I'm going to get the exact same answer. So all of these here, I'm getting 61.9. So I know that angle B has to be 61.9 degrees. Now the fact that I know that I've got one angle of 61.9, I have one angle of 90 degrees, we can go ahead and find angle C by taking 180, subtract 90, and subtract 61.9. Or what we can do is we can use our other trig ratios here to be able to solve for angle C as well. Doing the same thing, we're going to be looking at, since the sine of angle C is 16 over 34, we're going to take the inverse sine of 16 over 34. Or I could take the inverse cosine of 30 over 34. Or I could take the inverse tangent of 16 over 30. When I put these all into the calculator, they're all going to give me the same value. Inverse sine of 16 divided by 34 is going to end up giving me 28.1 degrees. And so if I were to continue to do this with both cosine, inverse cosine of 30 divided by 34, I get 28.1 degrees. And if I do the same thing with the inverse tangent, So here I'm getting the exact same angle, just in 3 different ways because I'm using a different ratio that's created. And so that's how you find a missing angle. So now if I go to this triangle here where I'm trying to find x, based off of where x is, I'm given the opposite side and I'm trying to find the hypotenuse. Opposite and hypotenuse, we're looking at using our sine function. So we're going to be using the sine of angle x is equal to 24 over 37. Now if we want to solve for x, all right, sorry. So now where was I? We've got the sine of x equals 24 over 37. So to find our angle, we're going to take the inverse sine of 24 over 37. And what that's going to end up doing here is it's going to give me my angle for x. So we're going to take the inverse sine of 24 divided by 37. And we get 40.4 degrees. And there we are. So you can set this up in a variety of different ways using sine, cosine, or tangent and be able to solve for your angle. If you have any questions on anything, make sure you write them down. Otherwise, we will take a look at this more in class tomorrow.